The purpose is to hold a public workshop at the request of the town council on the West Main Connington Development Project. We will have a presentation from planning department staff, followed by comments from planning board members, and then we will open it up to the public. Planning department staff will also discuss the process that is taking place as well as what will follow after this. Before we have the presentation, I have two pieces of correspondence to be received. The first is an email from Jason Gould, subject Ray checking in, dated Monday, January 20th, 2020. We have a motion to receive this correspondence.
So moved.
Second?
Motion's made and seconded to receive this correspondence. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Correspondence is received. Second piece of correspondence is a memo to the Middletown Planning Board and the Middletown Town Council from Stephen C. Ayton. Subject, public input, future development, West Main Connington Development Center, dated 2/26/2020. May I have a motion to receive this correspondence?
So moved. Second.
Motion is made and seconded to receive this correspondence. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Correspondence is received. Can you hear me now? I can't get it much closer to it. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
She's checking it.
Can you hear me now? Well, you're in the front row, John. Any better? Can you hear me now?
Commercial for Verizon.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, sorry about that. Ron, are you ready with the presentation?
Sure. So in terms of the agenda for tonight's meeting, we're going to define the study area, talk about the goals for this meeting and what will be happening going forward, look at the current conditions of the subject property, look briefly at the studies. There are two studies done previously on the properties, look at some of the output from those, and then accept public input, questions, comments. As Paul mentioned, this is primarily an effort to receive additional public input regarding the potential development of the subject property. The town council requested that we receive additional public input given the amount of time that's gone by since the last time we checked in with residents of the town. And I'll get into the studies that were done back several years ago. And maybe not. Maybe not. There it is. So the area of discussion in the area that was the subject of the prior studies involves, give or take, 15 acres. It's actually a little bit over 15 acres of land that is now all owned by the town of Middletown. It includes on the corner the former Navy Lodge property, which the town recently acquired, the West Main Recreation Complex, the library, and JFK School. So those properties are identified in the yellow shading. The red line that goes beyond that area, that was the original study back from the 2011 review. That was the study boundary where we had the consultants work with us to look at potential opportunities beyond just the town-owned properties, also looking at the abutting privately owned properties and opportunities to enhance the development that's currently on those properties. This is going to be a long night if this takes forever. We already have a windmill. So the goals for tonight are, as I said, to gather public input. What's happening is the town council's authorized the administration to put out a request for information to potential developers to get some input on what, from their perspective, are opportunities for the development of that subject property. This RFI, as it's known, will be sent out. It'll be advertised, but it'll also be directly sent out to developers in the area, regional developers, and possibly even national developers. We have a consultant on board that the council had us hire to draft the RFI, and they will be conducting that outreach to potential developers. And as you can see on the slide, we'll be looking for their input on what the market realities are, identifying the potential infrastructure needs, any potential zoning considerations, and things that a developer might be concerned about in terms of having that property serve its highest and best use, and also ideas for site design. That's the kind of information that we would hope to get from potential developers. Going forward, so after the input from tonight, after the input we received through that RFI process, which will happen over the next several months, or I should say several weeks, I'm not sure exactly how long we'll give folks to respond, maybe a couple of months in total to get all of this information in. That will all be transmitted to the town council, and we're at a point where the town will have to make a decision as to how to proceed with that property, how it would be developed, if it's going to be developed, and really what the town council feels should be the next steps moving forward. So looking again more closely at the properties, current conditions, and not on this slide, but just for the sake of having the information out there, that all of those properties, the 4 parcels of town-owned land are currently zoned public, which is essentially just a placeholder designation indicating that the land is for public use. When and if the town moves in a direction towards allowing the property to be developed, that zoning would obviously have to change from public to some other appropriate designation. That conversation will happen after, during and after the discussions about moving forward and how the town wishes to move forward with the property. It'll be if development is the direction that the town chooses to go into, it would be some form of commercial zoning, mixed use perhaps. So the properties themselves are, as I mentioned, the Navy Lodge property that was acquired by the town back in January of 2018, JFK School, which is, so the Navy Lodge property, is, I'm sure most of you know, is currently vacant. JFK School is no longer a school per se. It's not controlled by the school department. It's controlled by the town and is being leased by several service providers, educational providers. The recreation complex, including Potsy Field, includes the baseball, softball diamond, and basketball court parking. The library, 1970s building. One thing about the library is that the building itself is nearing the end of its useful life, so the understanding is that that building is going to have to be replaced at some point, whether it's on this property or somewhere else. And then, as I mentioned earlier, on the opposite side of West Main Road, there is opportunity for redevelopment of some of those vacant parcels, vacant commercial properties. And what we would hope is if the town moves in a direction towards development of the town-owned properties, that would trigger or incentivize other commercial property owners to improve their properties. We would hope that whatever happens on the town-owned property would be of a high quality design and something that would inspire other property owners to improve their properties. So again, looking at prior studies, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because we're not really necessarily focused on what has been discussed in the past. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to get a feel from you all as to whether those studies are moving in the right direction or if there's some other direction that the town should be moving in regarding these properties. The 2011 VHB study, VHB was a consulting firm that assisted the town creating that report. That was resulted in a fairly large report that's available online. The website address is on the screen. And then after that, in 2014, we had another firm basically getting a different look from a different group at the same property. They went into a little bit more depth in some areas in some of the work that they did, and that was in 2014, and again, that's also available online.
Ron, is anybody here from those groups tonight?
No.
Nobody's here?
No. So the 2011 plan, the VHB master plan, there was a steering committee that was set up. We conducted several public meetings, working meetings with property owners in the area, came in and gave us ideas for how they saw the future of those properties going forward. We looked at zoning, historic resources in the area, landscaping opportunities, recreation, transportation. And there was I'd call it sort of a rudimentary market analysis done at that time. And they provided, again, through the work with the town and the planning board back then, a preferred scenario for development, and that resulted in sort of a mixed-use concept. This is, again, very conceptual. If you look through the report, you'll see that there are some numbers attributed to some of the uses that are called out on the slide here: retail, office, housing, civic uses. I don't want anyone to focus too much on those numbers in terms of the square feet of each particular use. The matrix report also has some numbers for what they felt were appropriate levels of development for retail, office, residential, and that sort of thing. Again, don't focus so much on the numbers. I think for the purposes of tonight and moving forward, what we want to know is whether that mixed use concept, having that mix of uses on the property, makes sense to the town. And of course, we'll also get the input from potential developers to see if it makes sense from their perspective as to whether it's financially viable. So the VHB study, again, had those mixes of commercial uses, residential uses. It also had the possibility of including a town common or a gathering space, which I think the town still lacks to some degree. There's no central area where we'd like to hold community events, and that was an opportunity that was viewed as being a possibility here. Whoops. so some of the design concepts would be to have buildings closer to the street, again, trying to create more of a pedestrian-friendly village type of atmosphere, an internal roadway leading into the property, limiting the number of curb cuts onto West Main Road. You'd have maybe 1 or 2 access points into the property, and then an internal roadway that would serve the development within the property. Again, suggestion of a mix of building sizes, 1, 2, 3-story buildings, sidewalks, and the goal would be to have those internal roadways limit the impact, the traffic impacts on West Main Road by limiting the number of curb cuts. So that report is online. You're welcome to go and look at it. There's, as I said, it's a very thick report. There's a lot of information there, a lot of background that was looked at when we were going through that process, you know, going on 9 years ago now. So then in 2014, again, we had Matrix Design Group come in and take another look at the property for us as a follow-up to the 2011 work. Again, during their process, we had, I think there were maybe two public workshops that we held and accepted more public input. They evaluated the strengths and weaknesses of the area, provided recommendations. In terms of the strengths that were identified of the property, high visibility area, lots of infrastructure. It's basically got everything right there, but it's on the bus line. It's got public water, sewer. Opportunities that they identified would be, again, similar to the VHB plan, creating a civic space. And that's, I think, one thing as we get into the public input portion of tonight's meeting. I think the board and the council would like to know if it seems appropriate to you all to keep some sort of civic use on the property, whether it's keeping the library there or even moving additional civic opportunities onto the property. So we can talk about that later. As I talked about, they suggested opportunities to create a high-quality architecture for the area, mix of uses, and creating that town center. The weaknesses of the property, it's a narrow site. It's long and narrow, which limits the opportunity to get a lot of, I guess, development and getting, trying to limit the number of curb cuts and trying to get a road in there and provide the parking that would be needed. There are some limitations just because of the narrow site. The other weakness, the need to relocate existing curb cuts, which that can certainly be addressed through the design process. The threats that they identified is the concern about that properties across the street that might be in need of redevelopment may in fact not get redeveloped, although we would hope that, as I said earlier, that the town taking the action to redevelop its property would inspire those other property owners to do the same. Transportation issues, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. West Main Road is obviously a busy roadway, and we want to make sure that anything that happens on this property takes that into account. And then there's also the need to relocate the existing uses on the property, which is it's a timing issue. So as I mentioned earlier, the library, whether it's on that site or another site, will be housed in a different building. The recreation facility, the field, that's actually, that was a gift of the Navy back years ago, and there's a deed restriction on that property that requires that if we were to convert that recreation facility into another use, we'd have to reestablish that recreation facility somewhere else in town. So that's a consideration that the town would have to identify a location to recreate that facility. And that was sort of the highlights of the Matrix report. The concepts that they came up with were two slightly different concepts. The first one on the right or on the left had focused primarily just on the town-owned parcels, and it moved up at the top there. You're getting into where the JFK school is and moving back into land that's owned by the Navy, and suggesting that we may have an opportunity to talk with the Navy about somehow getting control of that portion of the property. In the second concept, it moves even further to the west into what is now the Landings housing development, and working with that property owner to perhaps include some of his land in a bigger project. And again, that would address some of the issues or concerns with the limitations that result from the narrow configuration of the property. If you're able to move further to the west onto that abutting property with some redevelopment there, it creates a few more options. And as I mentioned earlier, as with the BHB report, the Matrix report has some numbers, potential development of different types of uses. Don't need to focus too much on that because it's all up for discussion now anyway. But they do have, I'd say, a more robust civic component of this. So the buildings up towards the top there are town buildings, and they identify perhaps a town hall being relocated there, or the library. And again, this is all up for conceptual discussion, and certainly nothing that has been formally proposed, but just ideas that were being put out there for conversation. So that's the summary of those two reports that were done several years ago. So again, tonight we're accepting input. The board has been asked by the council to get some additional public input. We want your reaction to the work that was done in the past, but also any new ideas that you might have for how that property might be used. If you think it should be left as is, you can express that as well. I think I know we're going to take all of these notes. We're going to transmit all of that to the town council with the information we get from developers, and the town council will ultimately decide what will happen with the property. So with that, I think I'm done, and we can move on to questions and comments.
Any comments from planning board members?
I do. I'm going to reflect one of my favorite philosophers, Yogi Berra. It's deja vu all over again. I was on the planning board when we came up with the public input and the plan you currently see. I am a passionate believer in this plan, and I think everybody that sits up here has a shared responsibility to look out for the future of this town. And I want to tell you that the future of our town, I think, is dependent on the success of this project. And I'll explain that. There are some unpleasant realities coming down the pike. We have a declining population and an aging population. I'm part of that group. And the tax revenues from the residential sector, which are combined with the commercial sector, what funds the town and keeps our services intact. And am I convinced if this project does not succeed on a commercial basis, there are two options for us in the future. One is that our taxes will go up or our services will go down. And I think both of those are not desirable outcomes. So I encourage support for this project, and I will encourage it, I think, for our council to act on in a positive direction. And I think I can speak with my passion for this with my teammates up here on the planning board.
Any other comments? Ron, the town currently owns the land that's shaded yellow, is that correct? And the land outlined in red is not city property, town property, is that correct?
Right, again, that area was seen as the full project planning area back through those studies. Not that the town was going to be doing the development, but the opportunity would be that we would partner with private developers on both sides of West Main Road, or at least encourage those private property owners to improve their properties. And there was discussion, and I guess this will come up as we move forward too, is whether or not there would be any particular zoning regulations or design requirements that would apply perhaps not only to the town properties. I'm sure the town is, if this property is redeveloped, the town is going to want to have control over what it's going to look like. But those design standards might be expanded beyond just the town-owned property. So that's what that red line represents, an area larger, and that red line isn't written in stone either. There may be a desire to expand that area of design control even beyond that. But again, that's all up for discussion.
And for properties that are not owned by the town, have incentives been discussed?
We haven't gotten to that point yet.
Not
no.
yet, okay. Any other comments from planning board? Bill?
So I echo what Art says. At this point, this has been certainly some pretty important property in town, Art. And I'd like to see us move on this in some direction. Getting the input from the public is very important. Getting it back to the council is just as important, and even more important is getting this thing out there get the RFI out there, and let's move on this. I'd like to hear some different ideas. I think that's what we're here for. I support much of what was in the previous plans, but I'd like to see us move on this. I don't want to see us lose an opportunity. Certainly don't want to rush, but at the same time, we need to move on this. I don't know how many times I can say it, but I'd like to move on. The only element that, to me, that I'd like to put back on the table is some type of a west side station for our fire department in some capacity. I think that's something that is, I know it was discussed when these plans were talked about in the past, and I think I know the reasons why. But I think in light of what's going on in town now, I think it bears consideration to put that back on the table. That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we can open it up to the public now. Is there anyone who would like to offer some comments?
Yeah, thank you. Am I close enough to this, or up? There you go.
Can you hear him back? Yeah, you're
Okay.
okay. You're
Yeah,
okay.
this is Morris Hirsch. Basically, there are two areas I've been familiar with. First, I had rented a house in the area that's like right behind IHOP, where there's basically, there's a front strip there with some businesses. IHOP is there, and there's a few other ones there. There's a piece of vacant land now where there used to be an elementary school, and it's now just, a playground. And back in there are several streets. I had rented a house there before I decided I wanted to stay here, and then I wound up buying a house over on the other side in the beach area between First and Second Beach. So I've been there since, but these are two areas I'm familiar with. And basically my belief is people want to live here in both of those areas. If there was more places for them, there would be more people wanting those places. But they're only so big, And what I'm seeing here is an opportunity to not put more commercial property over here, but put in another street or two streets of small building lots, like the one I'm on, what is it, an R40, 50 by 100, something of that size, or some of them a little bit larger, basically at market value, and basically they'd be gone in no time, and basically not a single developer telling everybody what to put on them, but simply what the zoning allows you to put on them, you can build on it, and basically you cannot start coming back in with variances because of what you wanted and what you needed and whatever else. It would make the building inspector's job a lot easier to say, this is what you're allowed to build here. You don't have to build it all at once. If you want to put an upstairs on it at some time in the future, you're allowed to do it. You can't make it 20 feet bigger, and you can't go back before it's not supposed to go. You were told your dimensions, you got them, and you can build on it whatever you want to, as long as it meets all the standard requirements. And don't keep your neighbors awake all night, and all the usual restrictions, and basically at market value. And the only restrictions I would really have is I would like them to be, at least initially, owner occupied. If somebody in the future wants to sell one, of course they're able to. But initially, at least, I would like these all to be owner occupied. And nobody can own 2 of them or buy all of them. And that could be in your requirements. And I think you would actually need a lottery. They would go so quickly. And they'd be gone in a flash. And people would be very happy to have them at market price. And if you can't make money on people living here, we're doing something wrong, you know? As for some of these other issues, the school and the library, if those buildings are in need of updating, you can update them or put them on the other side of the street, whatever. I would never let go of community property that you already own for whatever reason. You know, you can, if you let it sit vacant for a few years, like that school, you know, which they tore down because it was falling apart. It wasn't safe to have kids in it anymore. The roof was going to collapse. So they tore it down. You could always put a school back on that side of the street if you don't want it on the other side of the street. You know, there are certainly some details here. But I think basically I want this to be a place where people can live and they will be happy to live here. And especially if you have an elementary school there on one side of the street or the other, and a library on one side of the street or the other, this is a very desirable place that people would like to come to. I don't think you need any more of the commercial stuff to carry the freight. There's plenty of it, and the nature of it constantly changes. It used to be every place was building malls, and now most of those malls are empty. And basically even smaller stores because of all the online stuff. Honestly, no matter what you try to do to predict the future, it's very difficult. But one thing people always want is a place to live and a place where their children have good schools and a library to go to and safety. And by the way, one idea you mentioned about having facilities on that side of town, either a police station, fire station, or a combined utilities. You know, it's a very busy stretch of road, and you know, they don't have to stop for all the lights, but they still have to get through the traffic. So if you had some facilities over there, it would help that a lot. I was very happy to hear you mention that. And I think I'm pretty much done. One last thing I want to mention, the idea of a master plan, you know, where everything has to look a certain way. I've spent some time on Cape Cod and some other places that have that type of thing. And very simply, it's not Rhode Island, you know. If I want to see everything look beautiful and exactly alike, there are plenty of places I can go where everything looks exactly alike. And I never liked any of them, you know. I like it fine right here. And with that, I think I'm done, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
My name is Alan Schurz. I live in Portsmouth, 40 Roger Williams Court. I've had a business in Middletown for over 40 years. I've been in the real estate business in some fashion for approximately 50 years. I've been in brokerage, appraisals, consultant, investment. And I thought, and I haven't had the opportunity to come into Middletown and be here much in the last few years, but I thought with this, that this was such a large, important undertaking that I would come in and put my 2 cents, and I hope that I can help in some fashion or way. First of all, the property that you're talking about, I think we all agree, is an infill location. It's not sprawl. It's already other development around it. So that I think is a very positive point. It has all the infrastructure in place, which is also important to use. You have your sewer, water, electric, gas. It's all there right now. When the first comp plan was developed here in Middletown, I was on the land use plan in Middletown. Mr. Burns at that time was involved in that. And we called the West Main Road, the East Main Road, Valley Road, some of us the Golden Triangle back at that time. And it's still, to this day, really the central core, you might say, of the commercial, office, traffic, all intertwining in the town. As was mentioned, you've discussed looking for tax positive type development. It's a very important point. All the communities, I think, around here are facing the same situation. And so I think with this, that in order to take some of the tax burden off, you need to look at uses that would be really non-residential in use. Residential, because of not having to be on the main roads and whatnot, you can put that usually in different areas, whereas your commercial, whether it's shopping, offices, small businesses, whatever, need to be in exposure areas where people can reach them. I liken the area to uses such as banks, restaurants, and again, retail, private business, insurance, whatever. And I call them neighborhood retail anchors, not your Walmarts or large, but where you have a certain draw for, I would say, like mid-sized type properties, and then with your smaller uses along with it, drawing it. The values in the areas there, I think it was mentioned many years ago, and give or take, not doing an appraisal, but just taking a round ballpark figure of $1 million an acre, I don't think there would be that many people that would challenge that thought in that area. So, and that's with it scraped, with nothing on it at all, with everything off, just a total scrape job. I also do not think that a proper use would be in this area for for governmental type uses. Governmental type uses and residential can be put in other areas. This is really a special opportunity right now for retail, where you should be getting in your highest dollar amount that you can because of, I think, the traffic counts, the infrastructure, and that's there that's desirable for the type of uses that would pay to get that. I'd like to bring out that it's 15 acres. It's not 150 acres. I'm hearing governmental buildings, retail buildings on it, schools, all this. The property is not small, but it's not large. It's a medium-sized property. So I think that for a lot of your users that would be using it would be properties that would need like 1 acre to 2 acres in size for their particular use. So you're looking at maybe 7 or 8 uses even on a 2 acre. And as far as the depth, usually the frontage, which is the most important criteria, if you go back 250, 300 feet on your property by 200 to 200 and some odd feet of frontage, that covers your usage for a lot of different retail venues. Was mentioned about the access way, the traffic. I think we all realize that there are traffic issues in that area. So with the GBA or LBA right now, you're allowed one curb cut, a minimum 300 feet of frontage. So with that, I would advocate, along with something like that, that you also have shared curb cuts with that. So in other words, you'd have your one curb cut, but you'd have two uses off of that one curb cut, something like that. That way you would not be taking up the rear of it, even with additional roads or whatnot for it, that it would be all usable, income producing. Because I'll end it with this. This, I think, is the greatest opportunity of the town to put on properties that would be tax generating for it. There's other areas of town where you can put, like I say, these other uses that are lesser, but to leave this for it, I know maybe it's not the most artistic, poetic, whatever type of thoughts, but in practicality, for the generation of what you need really for the town of pulling dollars, I think that really you should look at it. That's my comments. Thank you.
Question?
Yeah, sure.
Alan, question for you?
Yeah.
Is it okay, Paul?
Yeah.
Alan, just for a comparison,
Yeah,
I don't think it's a secret. We know you own the property on Valley Road
yeah.
at the corner, not at the corner, but the stretch there. You mentioned the 15 acres. I understand that. How big is your parcel?
It's 8.5 acres.
Okay.
As examples, if you take like a Walmart, Lowe's or whatnot, they look for a minimum of 15, 16 acres to 20 acres for the one store by itself. On your lot coverages, like Stop and Shop, they're about 65,000 square feet. On a 25% lot coverage, you're looking at about 250,000 square feet, which would be about 4 to 5 acres for one grocery store. So what I'm saying is you have a potential there for uses, but it's not 150 acres. I mean, there are uses. So with that real special, unique location, you need to really focus, I think, on trying to get the most tax generation. You don't want something in there that's going to be obnoxious or traffic. In other words, taking into consideration all the things that like the TREC and you people and the other boards look at. But in other words, something that would flow with the town that would be high generation of tax dollars in that area.
Thank you very much. John?
John Bagwell from 587 Tuckerman Avenue, Middletown. I agree with the first speaker. I'm trying to think, I start with the vision of Middletown in terms of the kind of businesses we want to attract. And I see this as a town that's going to be once we get high-speed internet, it'll be a town, I think, that employers in the high-tech area seeking young professionals will want to locate here. But I think the thing they need is a place for their employees to live. And what I see here is an opportunity to create a handsome area of townhouses where young professionals, and along with couples finding their first home, would find it a great place to live. It's within walking distance of the movies and grocery stores and also restaurants. From that point of view, it could also, it just seems to be ideally situated. It's right near Newark. Newark employs about, 2,000 to 3,000 people, most of whom are young professionals. I don't see this as a series of block apartment buildings, similar to some of the Navy housing and other things. I see it I visualize it as a place that people want to live. We don't need more retail storefronts. We have with a declining population of full-time residents, we find that perhaps we have too many storefronts already when you look at the numbers that are there. In terms of tax revenue, I suppose one could argue that a commercial base would generate more tax revenue, but I think if things more important is what does Middletown need beside tax revenue? We need a place for young professionals to live and for couples starting the first home. And I have seen areas that I think I would like to live in. I don't particularly, I started out in an apartment, but I maybe in my own mind, I have in mind, but the kind of places that could be developed there. A lot of green area, and I think that's, in other words, I think that's the challenge. But I don't think we need more commercial space with a declining population, empty storefronts already. I don't think we need a new town hall. We have a great town hall. I think the idea of putting more civic area over there is not going to generate tax revenue. It'll be costly to move the things, and the idea of putting a new town hall over there is kind of bizarre. I think we have a great town hall right here. And if we were in the middle of a growing, the community was growing in population, and we could see that the town hall would have to add to its staff, well, you need a new one because you need more space. But I see this as just about right for the kind of services that need to be supported. So anyway, those are my comments.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrea Dwyer. I live on the east side of Lake Erie Street, 117. I'm actually in the right field of Potsy, my backyard. And I watch the kids play on that field and play flag football. My grandson sits in my yard and watches that. And I knew when I moved there that this development was going to happen, and I think it probably does need to happen, and that's town land. And I'm glad to hear that it'll be developed somewhere else. But I'm concerned about what's going to be in my backyard. But I'm also concerned about whether I'll even have a backyard, because I'm right on that divider. Some of these plans include a significant part of the landing's property. I think an assumption was made years ago that that was for sale. I don't think that's the case. I don't know that that's been addressed. I talked with Chris Bisho today of the Landings. He's the Landings real estate founder, and he said he has no intention of selling, so I think the town needs to focus on the narrow strip of land with the limitations that it has. The field that's at the end of Lake Erie Street is under Navy control. I don't think that's available. That, I believe, according to him, is slated for the Navy to produce a solar farm. They're required to produce a certain amount of solar energy within a very short period of time, and that's a piece of land that they have slated for that use. So some of these plans that I saw online, I was pretty alarmed because they all included my house, which would no longer be standing. I've lived there a little over 4 years, and I'm rather fond of it. But he reassured me that he had no intention of selling, and I hope that that is the truth. That being said, presuming that you're going to just work on that little narrow strip, I think you have to limit what's going to be there and how people are going to access it, and whether it's going to be through the Landings community, which would truthfully make that a less desirable community in which to live. Currently, it's almost 100% occupied. And there's a need for that. It serves Navy families. It serves people that are retired like myself. I walk easily across West Main Road to the grocery store, to the movies, Home Depot. It has everything I need within easy walking distance. I just would hate to see my neighborhood that I've come to love ruined by this development. And it's a beautiful neighborhood. It has old trees. It has houses that they put a significant amount of money in. There's no like apartments, a community like it in Middletown. nowhere else do you have an apartment with a fenced-in yard, a shed for storage, a place where grandkids and little kids can play, a place that school buses go through. It has playgrounds, it's safe, it has good sidewalks. And that's all, that's what I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Roby Faria, 9 Cardoza Terrace. About 4.5 years ago, I walked West Main Road from 1 Mile Corner to the Portsmouth line. I tried to catalog everything on the road that I could. It's a very eye-opening experience. While walking, I could have eaten lunch at one of 15 restaurants, gone to 9 fast food takeout, but there was nowhere to sit. I could have had my hair done and tanned at one of 18 spas, gotten gas at 4 stations, picked up parts for my truck at 7 auto parts stores, bought a car at any one of 7 dealerships, stayed at one of 8 hotels, worked at one of 7 offices, seen a doctor at one of 6 medical offices, gone to 2 grocery stores, 5 hardware stores, 4 banks, 3 convenience stores, 1 liquor store, 51 assorted small retail, washed my clothes at one of 3 laundromats, visited 4 schools, the library, or gotten forgiven at one of 4 houses of worship. There's 77 homes, 7 developments, 4 farms, 6 lots, 10 empty buildings, 9 open space areas, 8 shopping centers, 14 strip malls, 15 stoplights, and 70 large lit signs. This road is heavily traveled and it's a sensory nightmare. Why not provide a small respite from the rat race on this road? How about turning the corner lot into a park with a walking path, maybe some picnic tables, some trees along the road, put a berm up to shield the walker from some of the traffic. You could always put buildings eventually in the back. The trees will cool the street in the summer, absorb and slow the water, and help purify the air. You could put out bids for food trucks, and who knows, maybe you could put the farmer's market there on a Saturday. As for Kennedy School, why not eventually talk about converting it into maybe senior housing with a mix for regular housing as well? You could also put the senior center maybe there, it's, you know, in with the whole thing. As for Potsy Field, maybe add some, maybe upgrade it a little, put in a pickleball court, something for the seniors and for the people in the housing area, or recreation stations. The best part is the cost wouldn't be as huge, and as a park, it's easy enough to change. It's harder to remove buildings after they have been constructed. This could be an attraction for people on the west side of town, and it's right on a bus route. Easy access for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Dustin Varnell, 54 Warren Ave. I just want to provide my support for the development for the mixed-use real estate that you guys specified in the beginning. I've been watching this for probably since it came out in 2007. I've kind of seen the development of this go along and some of the other ideas that have been thrown out. The reason I would like to support the mixed-use real estate is because that is something that I think will attract young professionals and people who are starting out. If you look at other areas in the cities, you'll notice that like the Boston Seaport District, Hoboken, New York, places like that, you'll see that a lot of people are going to that kind of development. The idea that everybody's going to get a cookie cutter house in Middletown probably won't happen. I would argue for anybody who has a decent salary and is starting out, try to buy a house around here. I've been living here for about 15 years, and one of the things I've noticed, I've been lucky enough to be able to live here. I kind of work far away. And I've seen a lot of the people who lived here leave, and I've seen that kind of balance or that struggle between development and non-development, and it seems like a difficult thing for the town, but it's not uncommon, I think, in the Northeast. Some of the things about the mixed-use real estate that were proposed in the plan that you guys just put forward is there could also be communal space, not necessarily developed by the town at a high cost, but that could be put into the developers. That could be through the HOA of some sort of real estate development, and that wouldn't have an external cost for the taxpayers. I also would like to just say that one of the other things the town's been struggling with is, as I see it, is Airbnb and short-term rentals. You know, we've had a couple meetings on how we're going to develop a tax base for that and how we're going to make sure that they contribute to the town. And then we've also had other meetings that say, how are we going to have affordable housing? So one of the things in the development would be just to make sure that maybe that's written into the property codes, that these do not allow short-term rentals. I think that would do well to keep young professionals moving in. I'd also like to remind the council of our opportunity right now with the development of the north end of Newport. I've been lucky enough to kind of work around the area now, and I see what's going on here, and we have a real opportunity at jobs. There's some growth that will get developed. It's not up to Middletown, and there will be people working there. They're either going to live off the island and commute through our neighborhoods, or potentially some of these people will live in this area on West Main Road. The other gentleman spoke about developing the commercial real estate aspect of the properties. I could see how that, like, on a dollar for dollar value could be beneficial, but I would also argue, or one of the things I'd say is, like, what are the implications and economic benefit to having several mixed-use real estate developments with young professionals living there on the town and related businesses? Because if we just put a Walmart there or some sort of commercial real estate, I'd like to see some sort of numeric value in that, because I don't know how that works. Also, I do not support any development from the town on West Main over there. I also agree we have a great town hall here. I think it's fine. I also see that struggle between the development of the town and private property, but I think one of the things to do is to make sure we have affordable housing. So further expense with that, I don't think would help. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Christopher Bicho, live in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, but I am very active in the Middletown real estate business community. Am a colleague of Alan's, as I'm proud to say. And I am the owner of the abutting property to the west. The opportunity is tremendous. It's not, as someone pointed out, and I think Alan makes a good point, it's not going to be the panacea that everybody's going to try to make it to be. The best development is done in practicality. And all the views mentioned at this podium tonight can be achieved with that parcel of land. However, the expectations got to be modest. It is only 15 acres. It is a tremendous opportunity to institute commercial that is useful in today's retail environment. It is a tremendous opportunity to bring residential opportunities to people who would like to walk to the Shaws, walk to Bank of Newport, walk to TD Bank. It is a tremendous opportunity to have green space. But the expectation, again, has to be modest. That being said, it can be innovative, it can be renewable, it can be attractive, it can accommodate vehicles and accommodate pedestrians and accommodate lifestyle. These are all just not noble, but very realistic objectives that can be obtained. I've been in the development business 30 years. There's going to be two stories of this piece of land. Three. The first one's going to be the worst story, where it just sits here for 10 years, and we all sit here on two sides of a table, and it looks exactly the same. Then there's going to be the part where the town is going to try to manipulate the properties to try and get people with different visions to get to the same place. Not going to work. it's an impossible thing. Developers have egos, people who have real estate have egos, they all want to put their own mark on it. The most practical approach to this piece of property is to work with a master developer. The town needs to partner with a developer who can gather a shared vision and execute a thought-out plan. That will get, I think, this parcel of land from vacancy to occupancy, and more importantly, have life in the fastest possible way. And that is where somehow this RFI process should take the planning board. It should look for a developer who has the financial capabilities, the expertise, and the vision to execute, and let the developer execute, and it will get done. Because financing will follow the developer. It will not follow the town. And I think everybody who stood at this podium has a valid and realistic objective that can be achieved on this parcel of land, though it may not just be as big as one of those items together. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. I'm Jason Gould, the owner of Gould's Wine and Spirits in West Main Road. I'm looking to move and grow my existing business into a destination location. I'm looking to create retail space, space for tasting and education, along with a recycling center to help control the waste issues associated with single-serve bottles and cans that are created by our industry. I'd like the town to consider local merchants that are looking to grow their business while helping provide incremental tax revenue for the town. I understand how it might be easier to work outside of the local community by finding a larger developer to sell to, but I believe opportunities should be given to someone local and who is invested in the community here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
Good evening. I'm not a Middletown resident. However, I am the director of the Head Start program. We have Head Start classrooms over at Kennedy School right now. I just wanted to, I'm sorry, Linda LaLivity. I just want to let the town planning committee know that there is another opportunity that Middletown has to bring in state-funded preschool classrooms. The state is funding, and there is a vision at the state level to fund universal pre-K in Rhode Island. So we currently run 3 state-funded pre-K classrooms. We see that other cities and towns are taking advantage of this opportunity. East Providence currently has 7 pre-K classrooms, so they have pretty much brought all of their 4-year-olds into a 6-hour day, free to families. There's no charge to families. It's all funded through the state. So I just wanted to let people know of this opportunity as well. We do have 1 pre-K classroom that will open up in September as long as it does get funded. It will go into the Kennedy School as long as we can get a lease. I don't know how much longer we will be there with everything going on, but we'll certainly be a partner with the city if there are other opportunities to either move the classrooms to another building, another space. I've been also talking with Superintendent Krager, and she also shares this vision for Middletown. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? It's your opportunity to give some direct feedback to the town council.
I'll also, Paul, if I could just offer the opportunity to submit comments in writing if you're not comfortable getting up and speaking during the public meeting. My email address is on the screen, and you're welcome to send an email with your comments to me, and that'll get forwarded on with all the other information that we're getting tonight and through the RFI process onto the town council.
Well, thank you for coming and for giving your comments. Any other comments from the members of the planning board? Do we need to do anything further tonight?
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.